Back ID60. So we have two lectures today. Let me go to the front slide. The first one is furniture placement for residential homeowners. And then we have a second one that focuses more on short-term rentals. So let's get started. So we're going to go through understanding space, definition and function, clearance, spacing and zones, basic types of furniture groupings, elements and principles, and personalization and comfort. So again, this lecture is one that I think sort of sums up everything that we've done in the class. So some of it might feel repetitive, but we're kind of seeing how these things work specifically for residential design. So when you're designing for residential, the goal is really to create an environment that reflects the person that lives there, right? And so not only should it reflect their personality and their style and their taste, but it should also be comfortable. Someplace where they want to be and stay, their sanctuary. It should function. So it's super important that it's beautiful, but it's also really got to function so that it supports their lifestyle. So you need to know what their lifestyle is in order to design for them, which is what we looked at in programming. So a well-designed home will improve a homeowner's day-to-day life, and the furniture placement will impact the energy of the home, the way the people interact in the home, and how much the spaces are used. So again, you're incorporating personality, you're incorporating aesthetics, you're looking at daily routines and family dynamics. So when you go in, you're going to go in and obviously measure the space to make sure that you know how big the space is and what furniture pieces will fit where. And so we've looked at plans and elevations. Typically, when you first go in, you're doing a really rough sketch like this one, possibly on grid paper, so that it stays to scale. For those of you who understand scale, it's super important because in order for it to be drawn accurately, it has to be to scale. And so for those of you that don't understand scale, forgive me, it's hard not to talk about it because it's sort of one of the basic things we learn in our larger program. So if you're interested again in continuing on in this field, ID22 is the first class you should take. It's our first drawing communication class, and it will teach you about scale. So you're measuring, making sure everything is to scale. And you could also do that with Collab Studio, right? So you're going to understand the space. So one of the first things that you want to do as a designer is not only understand your client by doing the programming, understanding their needs, wants, goals, but you also have to actually look at the space that they're going into and understanding and really honoring the space. So there may be some things that their goals are in opposition to in the space, but it's really up to you to decide how you're going to react to that. Maybe you do something that is a juxtaposition of the exterior, or maybe you do something that works with it, but it needs to be a decision that you make logically and with your client. Traffic patterns are really important in residential design. As human beings, we are designed to take the shortest path possible, right? So when I look at this image, obviously I could take the sidewalk and walk all the way around the grass area to get to the building. But as a human, if I see a shorter path, I'm going to take a shorter path. So we can sort of see how this line has been trudged in the grass from people sort of taking this shortcut. So if in a space you allow open flow, people will always take the shortest route. So this floor plan sort of looks at all of the different ways people would just naturally move through this space if it didn't have any furniture in it. So it's up to us as designers to understand how we want people to flow through our space, because if the space has no furniture, you're just naturally going to take face here. You're just naturally going to take the shortest route, as opposed to once you put in an area rug, A lot of times people will walk right around the area rug. Sometimes people will walk right through it if there's no furniture. So putting the sofa here really forces people to walk around that area rug, as opposed if I had put the sofa here, they may still clip the area rug and go at a diagonal. So how you arrange the furniture in a space sort of dictates the traffic flow or circulation. Clarifying a room's purpose. So is it a single use room, meaning it's a dining room and that's the only thing that's ever going to happen there? Or is it a multi-use room, meaning that maybe it's a long room that houses the kitchen and a seating area. In this case, this is a smaller room, but I think this is sort of a nice solution where they have a grouping or a seating area for conversation, and they have a sofa table in the back. So when I walk in, again, my back is not, or I'm not walking into the back of the sofa. They've put a table there, so it gives it some interest and some texture. But then that table has a leaf that can come up and also work for dining. So they've incorporated this dining situation right behind the sofa, giving that space two uses, a living room and a dining room. So you are understanding the purpose and the use of the room. And then again, like we talked about at the top of this lecture, asking all of the questions like who's using the room, what activities take place in the room, how many people are going to be in the room, how often do you use the room, are pets in the room? All of those questions that we went through on our programming, our residential programming questionnaire, you need to ask to make sure that you're planning the space appropriately. So when we're talking about traffic flow, you need to make sure that you're leaving enough clearance in between furniture. And so when you think about a door, doors are typically 30 to 36 inches. So 36 inches is 3 feet. So I always think of that as a typical clearance where I can walk through with my shoulders broad. So you want to make sure that if it is a flow where you want people to walk through comfortably, that there's at least 3 feet from the edge of the sofa to either the next piece of furniture or the wall or whatever it is. So 3 feet, again, allows me to walk with my shoulders broad, comfortably through the space. So anytime, again, you need to be able to walk through, the space should be 3 feet. Could go down to 30 inches if your space is really tight, but 36 inches preferable. If, however, it's not a space where I'm just going to walk through, I need to just move through. So that means my body is flat and I'm just going to shimmy sideways, like in front of a sofa and a coffee table, then that space can go down to 18 inches. And so 18 inches allows me to walk with my body horizontally through a space. And it provides for the use of this table, right? Because if this table is 3 feet away, I can't reach it. So the 18 inches allows me to walk through horizontally, but then I can also use this table. You'll notice that the chairs are sort of further away from this table, but that's because you never want to overlap these corners. So I circled it down here. Sometimes I'll see where chairs are pulled all the way closer into this table, but if there's a person sitting here, then they're going to be hitting the edge of this sofa. So you want to make sure that the corner of these two areas don't overlap. So that may mean that this space is bigger, which is okay because you're going to provide hopefully a side table where if they have a cup of coffee or a drink, they can set it there. A solo grouping, you want to make sure that there's at least 3 feet in front. I have the wrong note there. That there's at least 3 feet in front of the chair so somebody can stretch their feet out. So sorry about that. That's the wrong note. But in front of the sofa, there should be 3 feet. A table setting, so you're going to allow 24 inches for each chair. So again, my shoulder width is about 24 inches, give or take, right? So you can also have a program for your client that's specific to them. So if they're, like football players and they are much broader or wider people living in the home, you can allow more space. But typically you want to leave at least 2 feet per chair to allow enough space for people's elbows to move around and do all of that. You want to allow 36 inches between any desk or wall behind. So again, I know I've said this, preferably you want to have your desk facing out so that people are not walking into your back and being able to look at your computer screen. So if your desk faces the door, you want to make sure that the space you have behind your desk is 3 feet. On the side of the bed, are you starting to get the hint that a lot of these dimensions are going to be 3 feet? So on either side of the bed, you want to make sure you have 3 feet. It's making the assumption that 2 people are going to be using the bed. So you want to have 3 feet on one side for one person to hop in, 3 feet on the other side for the other person to hop in. If you have a twin, I know a lot of people like to push a bed up against the wall to save space. It is not recommended. It's not a good space planning idea, just because it's really hard at that point to make the bed. So if you only have one person that needs to access from one side, we recommend that 18 inches happens on the other side, again, so you can kind of shimmy in to make the bed. Oh, I was ahead of myself. So if there's a situation where there are 2 beds, we're assuming one person's getting in this way, one person's getting in this way. You're leaving 3 feet. In this case, there was no room, right? So I have 3 feet here. Both of the beds ended up being kind of pushed against the wall. In the ideal situation, you'd have 18 inches. And I want to say there are no hard, fast rules, but that's kind of not true. 3 feet, 2'6" is really a minimum. Otherwise, it doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like a really tight space to walk through. But again, if you have to put in 2 beds, right, and you can't get that 18 inches, you can't get that 18 inches, but it is recommended. So if you have a piano, guess how far it should be away from the wall so somebody can get into the bench and play it comfortably without feeling squished. Yep, 3 feet. So conversational zones. So when you're doing residential, it is important to create areas that function. And one of the most important functions are these conversational zones. So how you arrange the furniture helps support how conversations are going to happen. So we have activity zones, and this is sort of an extreme case, but I kind of liked the images. This is, I believe, in a basement, and they've turned it into this sort of extreme kids play space where they have climbing walls and swings and all of that space. So it could be an activity space, maybe not this extreme, but a place where you have a table with games and shelves, bean bags, that kind of stuff. You could have quiet zones, which means there's like one chair. Maybe it's sort of an immersive chair where you sit down and you feel enveloped. Again, I can sort of gaze out of the window. There are books behind me, so reading tends to be sort of a solo, quiet moment. So how are you, again, supporting these functional zones with how you're designing the space and how you're laying out the furniture? So the different types of layouts will conjure different types of conversations, I have found. So, oh, I'm sorry, we're not quite there yet. So this is actually floating furniture from the walls. So if the space is big enough, it is nice to sort of float the furniture away from the walls to get it close enough to be a conversational area. We're going to talk about different layouts. So this layout is actually a straight across layout, which we will talk about in another slide. But since I brought it up, it tends to be a little bit more combative almost, or direct communication, which humans don't like that much. So this is sort of interview style seating where I'm sitting here and you're sitting there and it's direct eye-to-eye contact, tends to make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. So this is like straight across seating, but it also is showing how the furniture is sort of pushed into the center of the room so that it's not so far away that I'm yelling at you from across the room. And I should say specifically for staging, this is really sort of recommended because you can walk all the way around. But if the room is not big enough, it's not big enough. Oops, sorry. So we have wall aligned furniture arrangements where again the furniture is pushed right up against the wall, still in a conversational arrangement, but it doesn't allow you to sort of walk around the perimeter of the room. So this typically happens in smaller spaces. So one of the things also that you can start to think about in spaces that are bigger, that are going to be holding more than one function, is how you start to define those areas. So area rugs become super important in this case. And again, you're making sure that the legs for the area rug are sort of anchored, or excuse me, the legs for the chairs or the sofas are anchored on that area rug, at least if the whole piece of furniture is not there. But this again starts to help define space. So here are our groupings. So this is a U-shaped grouping, meaning the furniture is really in a U. And I just saw these benches, so technically that makes it not a U-shaped grouping. We're going to pretend those are not there. So this would be considered a U-shaped grouping because I have chairs on this side and a sofa that's going around the perimeter of the wall. So this really encourages interaction. It's usually for larger groups of people can be involved in conversation, but it tends to be very comfortable when you're sitting at a diagonal from somebody as opposed to directly across, right? And you don't have a choice. You know, if you are in a space where you have a choice to sit directly across, and that's comfortable in that moment, then I think it's great. But when we have that, let me see if I have it next, that parallel grouping that we saw before, this sort of feels very confrontational, right? It's a little bit more aggressive because I'm looking you directly in the eye, as opposed to sort of like sitting, if I'm sitting here and you're sitting here, it's a little bit more of an indirect conversation. So that happens nicely in a U-shaped grouping. And again, I'm sorry, my image isn't perfect. We're crossing those out. So we talked a couple of times about a parallel grouping. So it's typically very symmetrical, and it's face-to-face communication, which again isn't always as comfortable. Typically, this kind of arrangement will lead your eye to a focal point. And then we have straight line grouping, which is really just a bunch of chairs sitting in a straight line and none of them face each other, which is super hard to communicate, right? So if I'm sitting here and my friend is sitting here and a stranger sitting in the middle, it's really hard to talk, right? So I don't know if you've ever been in an airplane where somebody's in the middle seat and your friend is on the other side. You probably don't talk to them that much because you'd be talking over this person. So straight line grouping is not meant to be conversational at all. It's really just to sit out and look at the view. And then L-shaped grouping is again very conversational because I can have that sort of angle. So typically think about when you go to someone's house or when you're in your own house, if one person sits here, the second person typically doesn't sit here, right? Because then that ends up being straight line grouping and it's hard to talk. Typically one person will sit here and one person will sit here. So you're sort of sitting at this diagonal from each other and it's just more conversational, more easygoing. And then this is my box shape, which mistakenly the slide I had before was also box shape, because now I have actually a whole box of conversational seating. So in this case, I have my L-shaped sofa, I have two of the larger chairs, and then I have two benches. Probably there's a fireplace here and they're not wanting to block the view of the fireplace, but this must be a space where they have large parties or they need to include a lot of seating because they included these two benches in order to grow the space. So design elements, and I included this picture because I like it. I know some of you are probably like, oh Lord, that's not good. I would not want to be there. But with residential, you get to use all of these same design principles and color and texture and value and space and light and pattern and line and shape and form and color to now really represent your client's personality. We've talked about with staging and styling how things have to kind of be pared down to meet the, you know, the buyer appeal and be more neutral so that a buyer can reflect how they will feel in the space. Well, now you're dealing with the residential client and it's all about them. So if your client is wild and loves flower prints and loves wallpaper and loves texture and likes mixing and matching and is eclectic, then you get to do that if that's your thing, right? So we're using all of those same design elements that we talked about in the past to sort of pare down and make a space calm. Now it can do anything you want that reflects your client's personality. Same with the principles, right? So this is not a space that would be a staged space. It may be styled depending on your client, but definitely not staged. This is definitely from a point of view. This is definitely somebody's very particular taste. This is definitely someone's personal art. But you're using all of those same things with rhythm, balance, emphasis, contrast, harmony, scale and proportion, and unity. But now really the focal point and the heart of the space is your client. Um, so this is also about personalization. So the person that lives in this house, much different than that last slide we just saw, right? This one is really calm, really sort of balanced. So you're really just reflecting your client's style. Even when I look at the top image from the second image, very two different personalities. The first one is a bit feminine, whereas the second one is either a little masculine or sort of neutral. So you're really, again, programming, asking your client what their needs and likes are, applying all of those same principles in order to really achieve a space that feels and looks like them. And again, more personalization. So this is the moment where you get to use all those family photos in the appropriate places, in the hallways, in the private areas, in the quiet spaces, to really sort of integrate the family or the person that lives there into the space and into the design. So basically putting it all together, when you're doing residential, a lot of the things that we've talked about throughout our class apply, but the specific things for residential is that you really need to know who lives there and how they use their space. You really want to look at the main focal points in the room, but maybe those are not the priority anymore. Maybe the priority is now the zoning. What is it being used for? Because the space really needs to function. It could be that the furniture groupings, whether it's L shape, U shape, box shape, parallel, you're using that type of furniture arrangement to support whatever types of conversations and interactions your client has. You're making sure the clearances are there so that they can walk through and around and be comfortable in the space. Again, the scale of furniture is still super important. You don't want anything overwhelming the space, and you definitely don't want anything too small for the space. You're looking at storage, right? That's a big one for if you are actually living in the space. How are you helping your clients create storage? When you're staging shelves and styling in the shelves, are you using baskets? How are you supporting the idea of storage? You're just making sure there's a balance of style, comfort, and personal touch. And then really think about would you want to live there? And definitely ask the question, is this something my client would want to live in? Because maybe you don't want to live there, but it's super important that it's personal for them. And that's it. So I will see you in part B, where we are going to talk about short-term rentals. Bye.